Welcome to the Futurist Society podcast, where we delve into the latest advancements in technology, science, and culture. From discussions on the latest breakthroughs in AI, biotechnology, and space exploration, the Futurist Society is your window into all of the awesomeness that the future holds. Get ready to be informed and inspired as we consider the positive impact of emerging technologies on humanity. Without further ado, welcome your host, Dr. Awesome.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Futurist Society. My name is Dr. Awesome, and we are broadcasting from the present and talking about the future. Today, we have Dmitrijs Jurins, who is a technologist based out of the UK, specifically in Manchester. And he has a long history of working for different companies. And right now, specifically, he's working in the Metaverse and augmented reality. So Dmitrijs, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself before we delve into the metaverse and augmented reality, which is something I definitely want to talk to you about. So just tell us what you're doing right now and kind of your background.
Sure. Nice to meet you, Dr. Awesome. Thanks for having me. True pleasure. I'm really looking forward to this session. I'm working in the smart buildings company at the moment. So I'm working with mission critical customers, ensuring they actually get maximum out of their built environment. So my mission there is to work with the building owners and operators to make sure that their buildings are built correctly, first of all. So I'm engaged with them at the design stage of the building because they are building owners and operators. I should elaborate this term probably. These people, these companies have everything starts from the idea like we need another building. Like either the company is growing, they need another office space, or it's a data center company, they need another cluster of data centers to be built. So this caliber of companies, and they're really interested in ensuring that they build it rightly. And as it built by third parties, yes, there are tenders, yes, there are preferred contractors, but as they build it, they collect all the information about what the building is comprised of, how to run it later. And they're following some 6-stage framework, which I'll not dive into. But at the end of the day, when the construction is over, a digital handover happens. It's a specific term from construction industry where 20 years ago, a truck full of cardboard boxes would arrive to the building owner offices and would just unload them and say, well, that's all you need to know about your building that we just completed for you. So there are all the operations manuals, all the insurance, all the procurement documents, everything. These days, thanks to the company I work for, we ensure this sophisticated, well-crafted, reviewed 3 times process of delivering that information digitally. And that's where we start working with the building owner to make sure they operate the building well, because the digital handover is all nice and good, but it's up to date only until the moment it's handed over. Then it becomes outdated. So we are true believers and advocates, and myself, I'm a big visionary of the digital twin technology. We, from the design phase of the construction, create a digital twin, a digital replica of this building. We work with the design agencies, architects, to make sure that they design the building with the digital twinning in mind. So we put the customer on the pathway to twin from the get-go. So any building management systems or energy distribution systems or any indoor air quality sensors are installed and provisioned at the design phase. So then the general contractor performs based on the bill of material. And at the end, you have a connected building that sends the data to the cloud. That's where the digital twin comes extremely handy. We treat the digital twin not just as a gimmick for marketing or even facilities management team just to see the building in 3D. It's a bit more like a database, really, because the process we build, the process of converting the architectural drawing into a graph database where we start building relationships between spaces, between assets. And for example, one asset could be a door. And you could build graph relationship between space 1, space 2, and the door that's in the middle, in between them. Where I'm alluding to is we can start doing thermodynamics. We can do liquid dynamics calculations. So we can see what the airflow would be. Practical application for that would be, as for one of our mission critical customers, a hospital, infectious ward, for example, you need to keep the pressure in the patient ward lower than in the corridor. So when the door opens, the air actually goes into the infected area rather than outside of infected area. Monitoring these things is possible, and there are systems doing that for a good number of years. But when you want to get a true insight into operational insight of your built environment, you do need to start collating data from various systems. So you start searching for correlations, you start assessing, you can start doing modeling, and having just the data is not enough. What we realized that a digital twin as the database, I'm overly simplifying that, but it is really a relational, very complicated graph database, but it's still about relationships. That really helps us to put the data we collect in the context.
Yeah. I really, when I think about what it is that you do, I think about all of the near future science fiction where someone like presses a button and a digital schematic of the building comes up and they're like, this is the path that we need to go to. Like if it's like a heist movie, they're like, okay, we got to get past this vault, and this vault has this password on it. And it's something that we intuitively think about, that this is something that's like available, but it's really not. Like there's only a few handful of companies that are doing something like that. Like you mentioned hospital, like I work in a hospital and it's completely disjointed. You know, you have somebody who takes care of the air conditioning, somebody who takes care of like the plumbing, somebody who does this, somebody who does that.
Yeah.
There's no overall sense of like, okay, we have a temperature of, 98 degrees in this ward. What happened? Is the air conditioning off? There's no like main control center like you would see. And if there is a main control center, it's like something from the 1960s, it's not something that is really updated. So that's really cool that you guys are doing that. And, I think it lends itself very well to us talking about augmented reality and virtual reality, because if you can create such a model that has an exact representation, and then those sensors that are in the building are represented in the digital twin, then it's really like you're being there, and so pressing a button and the digital model comes up is something that's really available to us now.
That's exactly our line of thinking. We were following exactly this path of thinking, and we realized that, hold on a second, we have a full digital replica of the built environment with all the data, both static, and by static I mean the actual model of the building, all the documents attached to that, and also live data from all the sensors and etc. And this pressing a button is a really good anchoring point here, because we realized that why do you need actually to press the button? Why don't we just gear up the boots on the ground, the staff doing the operations? It could be anything. It could be the facilities management. It could be the mission critical staff, engineers or doctors or anyone with that information in the augmented reality space. We looked we performed a hardware assessment, and we just realized that the devices that we have access to at the moment, they do give us a really good spatial awareness. They are really good at scanning the premises, understanding where they are. And that was the last straw that we needed. We could identify where you are. We put your avatar straight in the twin. We know which room you're in. We know your role because you logged into the device. And based on your role, if we know the job you're on, great stuff. Let's say you're an electrician to perform a diagnostics of the energy system that's located in the plant room B65. Great stuff. That automatically enables us to do the proper wayfinding. Let's say you're a contractor who came on site and not familiar with all the ins and outs. The wayfinding, access control, access to all the documentation. And then if you, even with all these tools, struggle, we can set up a remote session with the engineer from, let's say, Schneider, who is the supplier of that component that you're servicing, or Siemens, to advise you from the comfort of their house without traveling to the airport, flying to your country, traveling to the site, and then bringing all the tools and other spare items that took some carbon to produce. So it's a phenomenal amount of waste reduction, of CO2 reduction, and just general cost optimization and fault reduction. Now, there are a lot of caveats, and pretty much everything I named required a specific integration with certain things like, let's say, access control I named. Well, we do need to integrate with that access control system. Wayfinding we can do. Calling the Schneider guy, well, we do need to set up certain arrangements, but all being well and all things put together, that's the future, really, how we see the future. And that's exactly what we're aiming to deliver with our solution in the Metaverse. And that's the definition of Metaverse in our minds.
Yeah, I think when people think Metaverse, they think about the Facebook product, and they think that this is a virtual space for us to get together and socialize, which honestly, I don't really think is necessarily accurate. What I think is like the metaverse is a 3D representation of real life. And that I feel like is missing in our day-to-day life. Even right now, we're still having a two-dimensional conversation between each other. And so much of what we do is in this two-dimensional space. And I think that human beings are three-dimensional creatures, and this is something that we inherently understand. And it's why Google Maps has a function that has a three-dimensional function on it. I mean, it's something that we have available to us in technology, but I just don't really feel like it's been leveraged enough. And why do you think that is?
That's a very good question. And I do have real life examples. So, for example, I'm a very technical person in mind, naturally. My partner, she is an actress, and she's absolutely least technical person, probably, at least that I'm talking to. Very interesting observation I found by talking to her circle of acquaintances is that they struggle reading maps. For example, just a pure old school maps, it's very hard for them to realize where they are if they just look on the map. And then from the map, we go to the schematics. For example, the floor plan of the building tells absolutely nothing. But once you start showing the digital twin, they start seeing the visual relationships. They see the walls, they see the windows, they kind of start projecting that into the brain memory. I have in this case, a privilege to be technical enough and go through this hard bit of understanding all the schematical things and plan things. So I kind of get it, but I have a suspicion I was trained to do this. Maybe I trained myself or I got it as part of my general training. But answering your question, I think different minds work differently, and some minds go completely different path during their life cycle. That's why we find that our immersive metaverse products, the augmented reality products, click so well with the wider variety of people, and digital twins as well, because prior to digital twins, we worked with our customers, and some of the people, despite the company being technical, still had issues looking at the floor plans, for example, like to find that plant room A35B, because floor plans, not necessarily, they can correlate to reality. But once we start showing them the digital twins or letting them experience things in Metaverse, we see how it clicks. It's an immediate feedback, and that's interesting.
I noticed that too. I think that's the thing about human beings, is that if we cater to what we have been evolved to understand, and three-dimensional images and three-dimensional understanding and awareness is something that we've been evolved to understand, then if we cater to that, then it clicks. But for whatever reason, I feel like it hasn't gotten the widespread adoption that I would expect it to, because this type of technology has been around for a long time. I remember, the Nintendo Virtual Boy back when I was very young, and this was like this amazing product, but it never sold really well. And even now, the Oculus is something that I feel like is widely available. It definitely has the capabilities to do all the things that you're talking about, but for whatever reason, it just hasn't penetrated into society, I think, that the way that it should. And so, you're in the technology space. Like, what do you think about that? Why is that?
Up until latest Meta Oculus device, up until then, the main barrier was the price point. The devices were available, but they were not so affordable. The latest release by Meta is really decent in terms of functionality and really delivers everything. It's the best device at the moment. It's 2 times less pricey as it used to be. It's still $1,500 or so. So still on a higher scale of things, but it's now more affordable. It's in the range of a premium iPhone, for instance. So more people will start adopting that. And that was the first one. We're kind of getting closer to breaching that barrier. That barrier is better breached when the economy of scale kicks in. Now, to kick in the economy of scale, and it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem, the companies like Apple, Meta, Microsoft, they need to create the ecosystem for the content creators, and it could be both content, software or hardware, hardware. These people need to have an ecosystem where the development tools are available, where the deployment platforms are available, the marketplaces we're talking about, the times where the software of your creation or game you would create for the 64-bit system you could sell on a tape or on a CD-ROM are all gone. All we need is the marketplace, like a Steam for games or Netflix for TV series and etc. And companies like Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, specifically Apple, are exceptionally good at that. So I do expect a breakthrough from the Apple event when they will release their augmented reality glasses, because they will not just release the augmented reality glasses, they never do. Look at all their product launches. They always release the toolkit for the software developers, the marketplace for the software developers, whether it's iTunes or App Store and etc. They give you the route to market. And if you compare us right now to us, let's say 2 years after the release, right now for me to get augmented reality developer, let's say Unity developer or Unreal Engine developer, I would either need to poach them from game dev industry. The salaries there are 6 figures starting, not starting, but a decent developer 6 figures. And in UK, it's a top end of the market in software development. Or I would need to poach them from the very niche industry. Like, for example, my lead mixed reality developer is ex-Airbus developer of the cockpit simulators for pilots.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward 2-3 years after the release of the ecosystem by Apple, every single university grad with the MacBook would be able to his side project, deliver it to market, earn some money, get experience on the market and be there available. So the price tag for developers will go down, more companies, enthusiasts will be able to create their products and deliver, and the hardware will be more and more widely available, means more production capacity, economy of scale kicks in, hardware, and that's the rolling ball that starts snowballing. And what I'm telling to my mixed reality development team at the moment, I'm saying, look, we are like a Nokia R&D team pre-smartphone times. We are doing really cool stuff that very little companies are prepared to pay for, but when it explodes, when another Steve Jobs introduces that new device that revolutionized everything, that's when it will truly kick in, and we will come there experienced and ready. But that's how I say this.
That's a really interesting point, because I never thought about the human capital being the bottleneck. And now I really understand a little bit more about what is holding us back, because I feel like when I look at technological advances, I always think it's like the science or the technology itself, or even the price point that's the logjam. But the development of developers is kind of what you're saying, correct? Like that's kind of the bottleneck when it comes to actually the rate limiting step when it comes to mass adoption of this technology.
Exactly. And businesses, let's say those who are on the receiving end of the technology, businesses will quickly catch up. I'll give you an example, which is very specific to UK, but very applicable to the entire world. UK is obsessed by health and safety and training. Any organization you join, you undergo training, inductions, health and safety training, procedures, and etc. And it's all paper-based, digital, doesn't matter, it's not augmented. And with lots of our mission criticals, our lowest hanging fruit in augmented reality is the training. We deliver training programs to our customers, starting from equipment familiarization, going down to the procedural training. So they train on mission critical equipment without damaging anything. They have absolute luxury and freedom of breaking things during the training. They're even encouraged to. One of the best augmented reality applications I've seen in construction was the working at heights training, where usually you just take someone, you strap them, and you just explain them all the caveats and all the difficulties in the dangerous environment. So you need an expert to be there present. It's a risk to start with. And they have a really good virtual reality simulation software that does this. Their fault rate and incident rate just went down immediately as soon as they adopted this technology. I met them at the award ceremony where they got, and rightly so, got an award instead of us, but because they are so superior and really good application. So back to my point, the training. I want, I don't know, the janitors to be trained in augmented reality. But for them to be trained, really, all those companies need to, first of all, know that the metaverse is not that bad stigma thing that we discussed earlier, the Facebook gimmick. It's the actual practical tool that is affordable. They can get it from a number of vendors. Moreover, it's like with the software right now. If their janitor, Bob the janitor, needs that software today, they just buy him a cheap Android phone. I see the metaverse being like this in years to come, where, okay, Bob the janitor needs training. Let's get him that cheap augmented reality set of glasses. There is the software that we have on a subscription or enterprise plan. Anyway, let's get him trained. He will get trained faster, quicker. We don't need to pay a lot to a person to hold this knowledge and train the trainers or
put them in dangerous situations like you're talking about, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I really like that app sounds amazing, because when you do put on a virtual, I don't know if you've ever had the experience of putting on a virtual reality headset and having the image of a really high place being put in front of you, but they have this experience at a lot of these virtual reality arcades where you're walking on a beam and you're looking down at like a skyscraper, and it truly feels like you're really going to fall, you know? So I do feel like there is a very powerful experience when you're talking about that app that is available. So what are the apps that are really getting you excited about the virtual space? Because I do feel like that specific app had a profound experience for me, and it really got me excited.
I'm very excited about the app that we are building personally, but before I deep dive into that, because that's the one I can talk definitely about, I'm really excited about the prospects of few apps. One is the cooking assistant, so where you are wearing the augmented reality glasses, so you see the reality. You are cooking and you want to have that recipe and the timers, probably some temperature information, but you generally do not work with temperature information in real life, so probably it would be a nice to have. But if I could get my timers on the things that I'm cooking and my recipe available, that would be already a great enabler for popularization of the augmented reality. It even sounds awesome. You can add onto that some integrations with, for example, I worked with one company from London, UK. They are focused on the fridge cameras, and they're working now with Electrolux to make sure it's part of their new product range. And that's basically a camera with the image recognition that integrates with the grocery stores for the product identification. And they scan all the time. Every time you open the door, light gets turned on. They see what do you put in. They try to work out the expiry times. So they are working on advising you the recipes you better cook today, and not only from the nutritious point of view, although they have nutritionists working for them, but also from the waste reduction point of view. So you get that information, you have the recipe crafted for you, you just have this recipe then floating or being stuck on the wall in augmented space. You're cooking and they
absolutely, because it's such a very straightforward thing. I mean, they're teaching robots how to cook right now, you know, robotic appendages that have the ability to make food. So, you know, us as humans, you know, having a timer and allowing us to do that would be a very fun and interesting and kind of like easy app, I think, to make. Yeah, that's definitely low hanging fruit, I think, for the consumer technology space, which I think would be interesting. But tell me about what you're working on. I would really love to hear about that.
We are from the smart buildings environment, so our customers would be already quite smart and thoughtful about how they design their and build their buildings. So there's a lot of information available from the start. So we are maximizing on that information repository that we built for them, the static information and the live information of all the connected systems. So I'll give an example of our data center customer. So we are working with their critical environment and operations emergency response teams. So these are what I call boots on the ground, who respond to any emergencies that are happening with the critical infrastructure. And it could be just the server showing a bad behavior. or it could be something as bad as an oil spill from one of the oil tanks, for example. So it's usually a multiplayer experience, and I keep calling it multiplayer because I love games. It's a true multiplayer experience where you have people in control center in front of their screens, some subject matter experts probably off-site and probably even off the island or off the continent, and there is the response team, and they do need to exchange information. For example, a guy in the control center is no longer seeing the fuel level from the generator room A, so he sends someone out with the lens so everyone could see what this person sees. Then for future reporting as well, it's being captured, and he can actually engage the screen capture when needed. So he could run there and see the analog gauge to see what the fuel level is, or just assess the situation. He needs to start the generator in room B. He starts that, but that room doesn't give him the information from the energy distribution system, because what you would experience when you start the generator, your amperage would go up on this certain circuit. You need to shut down another circuit, but he needs to run between the rooms basically. And here we can provide that live telemetry straight into the generator's room, and we also track the position of the person inside the data center and all the collocation spaces. So we know that you're actually in this generator room. It feeds that electrical circuit because we know how the building was built. So here you go. That's your electrical distribution telemetry data straight here. Start your generator. You don't know how, or something is wrong, here is the operations manual for you. Still doesn't work for you? All right, shall we call in the expert? And we call in the expert company, and they see what he sees or she sees. They point, they draw. It's actually very futuristic experience when you see someone in front of their team's screen. They draw an arrow pointing to the part of the generator, but from the person wearing the lens.
Oh, he's pointing to the actual part.
Yeah, 3D arrow actually appears.
That's awesome.
Points to that part. And
that's what I think, that's what people think about when they think about near future technology. Like, in James Bond, you have to get to this part of the hostage situation. And Q is drawing like the wayfinding, and he's giving you all the information for, the vault opening up and stuff. I feel like that's something that I really look forward to. I'm very excited about what you're making, but I had a couple questions, just what kind of sensor technology is available for buildings now? Like, I don't feel like temperature would be something, cameras and all of the different areas that would be able to be routed. And how do you keep all of that information? Like, I feel like it would be different software that's running the temperature system, different software that's running the camera system, all these different, so you're just basically taking all that information. Like, how are you doing that?
You're absolutely right in everything you said. So let me give you two completely different examples, and those examples pretty much make up our real life and the buildings around us. You can have companies that build the building for themselves to run, so their goals are very long term, and they want to max out the operations of this building and reduce the running costs of the building. So they invest at the design stage, and they work with companies like Johnson Controls, for example, to make sure that their systems are fit for purpose long term, and also are interoperable with the systems in other buildings they have, so they don't need to train people in different buildings differently. So they think smart about this. In terms of what they actually fit in the building, very frequently in all examples, it would be driven by their present operational needs. So they know that their building needs access control system and needs the CCTV system and needs, for example, it's an office space, a premium office space. So they say, okay, we would actually go for indoor air quality monitoring to get a higher certification with one of the world leading certification authorities like WELL or LEED. And they quite well specify.
You hear about that. This is like a LEED certified building, and that this is like a carbon zero building. So obviously those would have more sensor capabilities for you to put into your little model, correct?
Exactly. And very frequently, this will be individual systems, really sophisticated, really good, good for purpose, and not necessarily they will be interconnected for some analytics. And typically they are not. They are isolated, siloed systems, and you would have some sort of a control room in the building where you'd have your building management system, your fire suppression system, your air quality system, and that's fine. And that's a good case scenario actually, where we then come in and digitize it and unify everything into the digital twin. And how we do that is we work with vendors. Our customers are building owners, operators, so they have a very strong buying power with those vendors, and they introduce us to them and say, look, we own the data. Fortunately, these days, laws support us, like GDPR in Europe and data protection laws of US. They clearly say the owner of this technology who bought this system owns that data. So that's all great that you have your cloud services, but if the owner says, I want this data to be sent to that company for digital twin, well, they are in all rights to do so, usually. And very rarely we see any rejection. These people work long term, they need to service those buildings, and the last thing they want them to break relationships with the customer. So they assist. Usually most companies have APIs, which is the means of machine-to-machine talking between systems, and we integrate with a range of APIs. We also perform some gap analysis, and sometimes we would understand that, oh, actually, this customer, and it's a real case of our customer in the US, in Atlanta, Georgia, they were not sure whether they need to move to the larger office or build the new office, because after pandemic, people were giving them mixed signals, whether the office is too crowded or not, depends whom you ask. So we installed the desk occupancy monitors, which is a small infrared sensor that installed under the desk, has the battery inside sufficient for 3 years, talks over radio with the gateway device, and basically is the binary logic there. I see warm thing.
So you guys are creating these sensors, or is this something that like you just knew existed? Or
we performed the market assessment. I'm coming from IoT background, so I'm quite familiar with majority of.
So that for those of you who don't know, that means the Internet of Things, right? Yeah. And so how these different sensors or different machine parts communicate with each other.
That's right, yes. And a typical sensor is nothing more than a small printed circuit board with few components, few sensors, whether audio sensor or air sensor, you name it. And it has some sort of communication device installed. In our case, it's a radio antenna and a battery or a power source. So that typically is the sensor, and that's typically what IoT is. Anything less sophisticated than a mobile phone gets a tag IoT, it's a device.
So you're making those yourself, or you're getting a vendor to do the making the sensors?
At the moment, we partner with a variety of vendors.
Yeah.
We have our preferred suppliers because every single vendor needs, although there are common interfaces, how you exchange the data, every single implementation is a bit specific.
So the reason why I'm asking is because, okay, let's say you work with a vendor, right? Like the occupancy rate of a building is something that you set up this system to measure the occupancy rate. That sends a certain amount of information to you, right? So that's one sensor system. And then let's say the temperature sensor system is another software, and that sends information to you.
That's absolutely right.
You are the person that translates that information, correct?
That's right.
You put it into that digital model. How difficult is that? Not only how difficult is that, but is there further specialty in acquiring that sensor information? So another hypothetical, let's say I'm a medical, like a hospital, right?
Yep.
So I want to make sure that I understand the ventilation system, and that might be a certain, vendor. If I'm in the medical space, do I need to be a specialist to learn that? Or is a company like yours able to like easily learn that because, it's just this type of information, we can just integrate it like this?
Yep. To answer that, put a reference to the data mining and data analytics. If you talk to the data scientists, they would usually say that in my job, 80% of time, or a good portion of time, I spend cleaning the data, making sure the data is actually I can work with. And then the rest is my analytics of the data. So we realize that, and in the design of our digital twin system, we perform this data homogenization or sanitization at the data entry. So we receive the data, and let's be honest, the data does come in all sorts of shapes and forms. We do have a technical know-how to receive this data, whichever format or transmission technology is used, but then we don't just simply dump this data in our data warehouse or database and just say that's the data. We start making sense of the data at the data entry, at the data acquisition point. So that's where we start making references to our architectural model. We say, okay, we see it's the sensor ABCD. We check the model. Okay, ABCD is in the room 505. Let's link them together, and then it's called data parsing. We parse the data, and then we start already attributing this. Okay, so base value is the CO2, and this is the rotation per minute of our HVAC system. So we start cleaning and cleansing the data when we receive it. That means that our data analytics from the start works with the clean data, which is also the relational data model. Mm-hmm. So put the relationships. And then we do understand our customers and our end users. And specifically in the very beginning, I mentioned that the built environment or our buildings industry is years behind technologically. And hence the users are not that technologically advanced to the data or draw the correlations themselves. We understand that really well. And typically with any customer I work with, I set up a focus groups across departments to understand their operational needs, their goals, long-term and short-term goals, to make sure that the reporting, dashboarding, alerting actually makes sense. That's critical because they are at the point where they have not yet adopted this technology. No one did. It's new to everyone. It needs to be easy. So here we follow like Apple guidebook where the technology needs to be really easy to use. Rather limit functionality but make it streamlined and easy to use than confuse the person with a lot of things they need to correlate and eventually just give up. What I'm telling to my team, the product design team, is we are there to make their jobs easier, not harder. That's enough, really. This is why we are there. And that sets the scene on our design and user experience decisions.
So if what I'm understanding correctly is you get all of this data and you homogenize it. So whether it's architectural data from how the building looks to the temperatures to the CCTV to all this stuff, you homogenize that and then you make it into a package that is easy to understand and is based in 3 dimensions. Because that's inherent in the benefit, the augmented reality or virtual reality. Which one of those is harder? Is it harder to homogenize the data or is it harder to create that model?
I think it's hard. The hardest is to create the model that is useful to the end user, to the receiver. This is the hardest bit because homogenizing the data, that's software development. We have professionals there. We know what we're doing. We can do that. Creating the models, displaying the data in augmented reality. We have really passionate individuals there because most of my augmented reality developers are in the industry because of their passions for gaming, usually gaming. They are a creative bunch. Absolutely. So creating something that really looks good, is slick, or is very interesting, it's a given. It will be like that. But then putting it in the context of a non-technical, not, let's say, not a gamer, not a person who just is his first experience of using the augmented reality, that's the trick. And not always we are successful in getting this right, first time right specifically, and also limitations of augmented reality. Some people just feel dizzy, some people don't know, kind of forget how to use their hands when they are in the augmented reality space. Some people buy it quite quickly, but user experience is the hardest part of this job, is to that you put the glasses on and it's so easy for you to use it. And that's, by the way, putting back a reference to this ecosystems that companies like Meta or Apple are creating. If you recall how the Apple iPhones were released and when we started using them very first time, and through the first years, recall how consistent the experience was. Your swipes were always doing the same thing, regardless which app you're in. You knew how to close the app, and it's still like that, and it didn't deviate and didn't create it's a very consistent experience still, because Apple is really strict with their design guidelines from day one of releasing the technology. This is what I'm looking for. At the moment, I am creating and my team is creating the design guidelines for these users, and it's hard. We set a lot of workshop with people. We dive into the human motorics. How do they actually do things? It's hard, and we would like to just make great software, right? And we have to study all that. When someone like Apple would release their ecosystem, that also will be considered. I can pretty much guarantee this. They did it with the phones, with the watches. They will do exactly that with the augmented space. So then I want a person who first time put the glasses on in their late 60s, for example, know how to pinch, how to point, and know that swipe does that. And Apple will enforce me doing this. And if I don't, my users will give me bad feedback, but at least I'll have the rulebook. At the moment, I'm building the rulebook. That's a bit hard, and that's answering your question is the hardest bit, making sure that the user experience is correct.
When is the Apple augmented reality or virtual reality set coming out? Do you know?
It's been pushed back few times already. At the moment, they are banking on July. I think there is a big Apple developers conference in June, July this year. So really looking forward to that. If not this, then will be new product launch in October, November. It's cooking, it's brewing. There are, of course, leaked prototypes, leaked schematics and patents. It's a real thing, and there is plenty of people working in the space, of course, under strict NDA. So something's coming. Really looking forward to that.
So what's the price point for that? Do you know? Are you familiar?
It will be expensive. It's $2,000, 2,000 plus.
Wow.
So it will be
premium product.
A premium. It will still be a premium product. But, iPhone was and still actually is quite premium. So I have trust in these guys. They've done it before. If someone can, or let's put it this way, if someone can pull this out and create an ecosystem,
it's going to be them.
It's going to be them. Microsoft already did that in terms of the
HoloLens.
Yes, HoloLens and the entire backend infrastructure, because Apple is great with the software development kits and bits and pieces, the marketplace, but frequently you will need the cloud-based servers, content delivery networks, some frameworks, software development libraries. That's Microsoft field, and they already are there. And really well established. They already made themselves device agnostic, which means they will work with anyone who comes out with their product, whether it's Apple or Samsung or Google, and most likely they will use their technology directly or indirectly. They will. So Microsoft already set the scene. That was a very good precursor for everything. So yeah, waiting for Apple. You never know. Maybe Google will announce something. They did with Google Glass ages ago, which was a failed product, came a bit too early and didn't have that ecosystem.
Yeah. So of the current peripherals that are out right now, I feel like we can really talk about some sort of technology that exists to establish a spatial relationship and turn that into software, right? So like when I think of that, I think of, obviously the Oculus. I think, honestly, I would put the Google Glass in there, even though it didn't really have widespread adoption. And, the HoloLens, or honestly, what was Microsoft had like a camera for augmented reality. What was that? It was like a peripheral for the Xbox. I forgot.
It was a peripheral for Xbox. Yes, I can't remember the name.
But honestly, I think it was plugged into the Xbox One, even with that. Like you didn't have to have it available. Like it was just automatically ingrained. But regardless, I remember having loads of fun with my family with like Just Dance and all these spatial relationship video games. So like which one of those is your favorite? Like what do you really enjoy using? What are you using in your product? Are you using these things, or are you using like a 2D representation that turns into like a tablet that becomes 3D?
We are using the Microsoft HoloLens 2, which is quite an old device technologically, but it has a number of very strong points. So let's say up until very recently, you either go VR, full virtual reality, or you go augmented reality, where you project something on a glass and your retina sees this. That has changed with the recent Meta Oculus device, because they introduced something that they call a pass-through mode. And the pass-through mode, with the increased resolution of the screens, because you do have screens right in front of your eyes, those screens became good enough to give you a full augmented reality view. So the cameras on the outside stream the video signal into those screens, and you see it like you do not have a visor in front of you. And that experience is truly mind-blowing. It really feels like there is no plastic in front of you. It's very hard to say that it's actually a pass-through or the actual reality. So I would say it will be called mixed reality from now on, have a feeling, because you will be able to switch between full virtual reality, where no reality is coming in your eyes, to augmented reality by the means of this pass-through. We're using the HoloLens 2 because that's currently the only and the best available device for augmented reality, which has sufficient processing power on the actual wearable. Others, there are really good augmented reality products by Lenovo, HP, but they do require, because they struggle to power it for long enough, they outsource the processing, which consumes the power. Processing and transmission of data are the power hungriest things on your device, any device. So the simpler device is, or the less power it consumes. And if you turn off the GPS, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth on your phone, your battery will last longer, because modems, they consume a lot of power. So what they have done simple glasses, but all the processing and communication is happening on your phone. So you have a wire coming to your pocket, which is not very convenient. That's why we're working with HoloLens 2 device. There won't be a HoloLens 3 in the observable future, but we designed our software to be device agnostic. I can take any device, it will work on any device. But HoloLens 2 just works really well for us. In fact, on Tuesday, I'm going to a company called Vizar. They are pioneers in augmented reality and mixed reality field in UK, a Microsoft Golden Partner, really smart cookies. And I'm going to experience all the newest available devices to see which ones are the best, just to make sure if we need to switch or offer customers a different product, we select the right hardware. And there is plenty of hardware available, and it's used in niche applications. Quite a lot in education. Quite a lot of universities are experiencing and experimenting with the augmented reality. Some mission critical companies are also very interested. Let's say oil and gas exploration. It kind of helps them a lot, because being hands-free in the hazardous environment is quite interesting concept. So yeah, there is plenty available at the moment. Some have their pros, and every single one has pros and cons, and people take different takes on how the technology should go forward. Really needs someone really big to come in and just set the rules and say, no, this is how we're gonna do it.
Do you have a Oculus at home?
I don't have Oculus at home yet to get one. So yeah, that's on my list.
Yeah, no, I haven't made the leap either myself. And I was like this close a few months ago, because I wanted to do this show, but do it completely in the metaverse, right? But I didn't know if there was really like a market for that. And I feel like there's been like a huge drop off in metaverse adoption. Do you feel like that, or is that just my naive thought about it?
No, you're absolutely right. It did happen, and it's very connected to, in fact, there is a drop-off in the interest to it, and there are a lot of rumors around. But if you look deeper, the natural thing has happened. So what has happened? Significant layoffs in technological companies at the end of 2022, beginning of 2023. Naturally, as a result of post-pandemic adaptation to the market, they overhired and etc. And one thing happened. Microsoft, which was the front runner of the technology with their HoloLens 2, has pretty much completely sacked their virtual reality development department. They were developing some toolkits like MRTK toolkit, which pretty much everyone used. It's now open source, and they haven't confirmed that there won't be HoloLens 3, but they didn't deny that it's also cancelled. A lot of people took it wrong, but we work with Microsoft. We are their partner and supplier, and it's not an exclusive knowledge, but the general description I received from the teams in Microsoft is, well, they just don't want to repeat what happened with Windows Phone, so they're no longer willing to work with hardware. They don't want to write the software for the hardware. They will provide the infrastructure.
Such a shame because honestly, I love the Windows
Me
Phone.
too.
I
Me
was
too.
the biggest fan. I thought it was so forward thinking, it was a phone without being tied to a phone, like the live tiles.
Mhm.
What a great
Awesome.
idea,
Yeah.
but anyway, I'm sorry. I would
Yeah.
talk to you for a lot longer, but we are
That's
getting to
fine.
the end of our time together. So at the end of, each podcast, I do ask each of my guests 3 questions that I've just been thinking about. You can tell that like
Sure.
I'm trying to listen to you, but in the background, my mind is just going like crazy. I have a
It's
ton of
been
questions to ask you. So first one, we kind of hinted at near future science fiction. When you think of science fiction that's applicable to your field, like what are you thinking of? Like what gets you motivated in the morning?
I want 2 things. One is more realistic, one is less realistic and actually quite scary. One thing is, I do want us to be more efficient and free from dull activities. And that's where I believe technology helps us. And quite recently, we see a huge effect that the ChatGPT or Midjourney are having on us. These tools I'm using personally to unload all the repetitive, boring tasks I don't like, and no one does. And that's how I see us in the future, where technology, whether it's the generative neural networks or augmented reality, they make us focus on what we are good at, best at, want to excel at. Different people will excel at different things, but the main direction will be you want to focus on something great. The rest will be taken care by technology for you at no huge cost, let's put it this way, at an affordable price. That's what drives me forward, and I'm part of this change, part of this transformation. At least I want to think this way, and that's how I see the future. The second comes out of the first, and is also very motivating and also very scary, is with us becoming more efficient, and that leads to efficiency, not just at your own well-being, like I'm more efficient at home, I don't need to after work spend much time doing nonsense tasks, but it also makes us more efficient at work. Specifically, it will make us more efficient at work first, because that's where the technology gets adopted mostly. So with us being more efficient at work, there are 2 ways forward. Which way we will go? One way is we will be able to do the work we need to do in less time. So we're talking about like a 4-day long weeks, 3-day long weeks, work as much as needed to deliver the things you need to deliver type of thing. And then the rest is for you, for your creative mind, for your leisure, and etc. That's where I would like us to be. So we can be so efficient as the society, as the humanity, that we don't need to work that much, that hard anymore. The second path leads to staff being made redundant, less ability to join the junior positions, more homelessness, more joblessness, because you don't need that many people at work anymore. You can just take me, for example. I work on average 40 hours per week. In Europe, we work 40 hours per week. So you're saying you became 10 times more efficient. Great stuff. So you will do 10 times more work in your 40 hours, and we will hire 10 times less people. Or in fact, we'll also sack 10 times more people. And that's the other path where we could go. And that is the scary one. Because
I prefer to think of myself as an optimist, and I think that human beings are going to rise to the occasion, and it's just going to make us more effective in what we're doing. So to kind of get to what I was alluding to with the question, like when I think of the science fiction that inspires me, Star Trek is one of the ones that really I look at as the most utopian, optimistic vision of the future. So we have artificial intelligence, we have all of these things that make our life easier, but it allows us to live more full and rich lives. And I think that's something that you kind of pointed to in the beginning, which really I do think that we're on the cusp of. I think that especially with, our phones in our pockets, it's just a matter of time before we get to the point where we're, using them as kind of like a guide to maximize our time per day and in the happiest and best way possible. Well, but what's some science fiction that inspires you? Because I feel like that's something that we had talked about.
I would say Isaac Asimov, Robert Heinlein,
I feel like Asimov is definitely the benchmark for an optimistic view. Everybody's so worried about artificial intelligence, but the three laws I thought were so well done that it's like, okay, like this can be a benefit for society. Like robots can help us,
Exactly. Asimov is definitely gives me this sense of optimism. There are, of course, a grimmer pictures drawn by my favorite authors, like, the Moon, the harsh mistress, for instance, where things didn't go that well, or just in general, yeah, I am more optimist as well. I'm like you, and I truly want to stay an optimist. And to be honest with you, it checks out. We are still going in the right direction. Yes, there are hiccups, there are bumps on this road. Generally, I think we're doing better as we go. Specifically, if you look at the wider landscape, like decades or centuries, we're definitely living in the happiest.
I totally agree. I totally agree.
If you watch the news, of course, we're living in absolute disaster. But generally speaking, we're living in a good time.
Yeah, I agree. So let's go to my second question. So I feel like I've always wanted to have virtually the ability to explore, space, which I feel like is something that is low-hanging fruit. Like we have all of this data about the solar system and our position in it and everything like that. But I don't know. I haven't found a good app for that. Is there a good app that you know of? Or if not, like, how do we make that happen, Dmitrijs? I want to make that happen.
Me too. And not just the space. Any experiences. It could be good experiences. It could be even bad experiences, like near-death experiences to trickle your brain and etc. Let's say in the game Cyberpunk, there was a whole narrative about recording someone's memories and playing them back to you, selling on the black market some bad memories or really good kinky memories and etc. And I think that the answer I'm alluding to lays somewhere there is at the moment our inability to experience a lot of things is just based around our geographical presence. So I'm here in Manchester. For me to experience a desert, for example, I need to board a plane and go to Africa, to Morocco or Tunisia, and then drive somewhere, and then I'll experience it. Too expensive, too much time. I'd like to experience from my home, but then, and space is alike, just slightly higher price tag.
Yeah, just marginally.
Yeah, a bit. But then my alternative is to use a medium. And I think at the moment we are limited by the medium, whether it's my phone or my computer screen or my virtual reality, which is again a medium better, probably the best medium that we have for experience propagation. But I would go for the neural chip in my brain. I need to go straight to the brain, tickle with the brain. I think there will be the answer, and then we will be able just to send a drone to another planet, do the recordings of all the sensors, and then play them back straight away to your brain. Because that's what we do as the medium. We play them back to our retina, to our ears. We can't do it to the nose. We don't have the smell generators available to us. But we tickle the sensors. We can, and the brain does the heavy lifting then to give you the.
But for what you know of, there's no space exploration app on Oculus yet. Do you know?
No, not really. No good ones. I've seen some from the education sector, a few apps, but they are good not for experiences. They're good for education, just to see how the solar system is built, where the planets are, how they roughly compare in size, but not for the experience. I think we think alike there, and I really would like to just drop on the couch, put the VR glass on, and just think that I'm on my SaaS Enterprise deck, just exploring the warp jump. We're not there yet.
Yeah.
Eventually we will.
So last question, where do you see augmented reality and virtual reality, or even your own industry in 10 years? Like, where do you see us being? Let's say Apple comes out with like an amazing VR product.
Yep. I personally believe, I advocate for this, and I lead my teams with the following narrative. In 10 years' time, mixed reality will be a commodity. Everyone will have a device at their disposal, whether in their pocket or an employer will give them one, or they will have it at home, but it will be just another medium that people can use, and there will be really talented people coming up with really good ideas how to use this commodity easily. For example, for cooking, for fitness, for driving, you name it, there will be someone who will come up with the great idea. There will be the whole distribution chain for this software. The hardware will be affordable. I didn't mention it before, but batteries is a very limiting factor at the moment for any wearables. Apple Watch is a good example. Fantastic technology. You need to charge it daily, and that's a boomer for a lot of people. Big disabler for the wider adoption of the smart watches. Same applies to augmented reality. So once all these things become better, it will be just the thing, part of your life, that in 10 years time probably you won't even recall, or you will think about you not having that was like a stone age. Like currently think about the mobile phones. And that's what I'm telling everyone, and that's where I would like to find us, and I'm actually actively contributing to that as much as I can from here, Manchester, UK.
That's awesome, man. Well, good luck to you, because I really look forward to that future.
Thanks,
so
Ross.
honestly, we have gone a little bit over time, but it was so fun talking to you, and I really look forward to this future that you are talking about. I wish you all the best of luck in creating it. And from the Futurist Society, we are signing off, and we'll see you next time in the future. Have a great one, guys.
We appreciate you taking part in today's episode. Take this chance to reimagine a better future by joining a community of futurists who strive for a remarkable world. Be a part of this growing network and contribute to making the world a more positive place. Visit thefuturistsociety.net and subscribe to the show so you don't miss a drop of hopeful futurism.